What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have another fun NHL division predictions video in store for you. In my last episode, I began with the Eastern Conference with the Atlantic Division, ranking every team and where I thought they would finish for the upcoming hockey season. And today I'm going to be tackling the other Eastern Conference division in the Metro. Now, there's a ton of great teams in this division, as well as a bunch of fringe wildcard contenders in this one. So before we get into this, if you guys want to follow along with this series and make sure you don't miss any of the other parts, hit that subscribe button now. It'll let you know whenever I post new content like this, and let's get right into this one. Coming in at number 8, this one should surprise literally no one. It's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus is still a bottom 5 team in the NHL, and despite them having one of the younger, more promising rosters in the league, they're still just not at that level where I'm going to consider them to even be remotely close to a playoff contender. Now, taking a look at their roster, their top line, and maybe their center depth is pretty solid. Of course, having Adam Fantilli, now Sean Monahan, and Cole Sillinger in their lineup. They still have Johnny Gaudreau. Technically, they still have Patrick Laine, guys like Kent Johnson. So it's not like their forward group is the worst, but it just doesn't really click well. There's a lot of young guys on this team who are just too inexperienced for them to be pushing for a contending spot, as well as their defense just looking a little bit lackluster, headed by Zach Werenski, Severson, Provorov, and it's just not really all that impressive when you take a look at it. They're also having drama with their goaltender Elvis Merzlikins, who just doesn't want to play for the organization anymore. A lot of guys requesting to leave the team, and just not all that much to be excited about for the upcoming season. For the future, 100%, this team's going to be great. They do have a lot of potential, but I just don't see them even sniffing a playoff spot for the 2024-25 season. Just quickly going over their offseason, they had a really good draft. They took on a couple of free agents who were questionable. Maybe they didn't really deserve the money that they got, like Monahan, but outside of that, there's nothing really that I'm excited for this upcoming season outside of watching their young players develop. They're not going to be playing playoff hockey come the springtime, and I think this is the perfect spot for them to land, get back in the draft next year, and continue building with this young core that you've developed. Coming in at number 7, I have the Philadelphia Flyers, a team that a lot of you are probably considering to be a bit higher in this division, but I'm really tempering my expectations with this team. They're still incredibly young, and I just don't see them repeating the exact same amount of success they had last season, considering no one expected them to be that good last year. So just taking a look at their lineup, they do have a solid forward group, especially with the addition of Mishkov coming up for the team. He's still going to be incredibly young, though, and his ceiling is going to maybe be what Bedard did last year, if even that. So I don't really see that threading the needle for the Philadelphia Flyers and pushing them into a contending spot. They could be a wild card team this year. You never know. They were on that line last season and just barely missed it. But with this forward group and the current state of their defense, with outside of Sanheim not really having a lot of great guys on the blue line, I just really don't see this team being a playoff contender, not even being a wild card spot, if I'm being honest. I think they're going to be in the hunt, but just not really make it in the end. Also, talking about their goaltending, obviously there's the stuff that happened with Carter Hart, but we don't need to rehash all of that. But they do have two guys who are really unproven in Ursin and Fedotov. I just don't know if these two guys are going to be the answer for Philadelphia this upcoming season. A lot of guys who need to prove themselves. Again, similar to Columbus, this upcoming season might not be the most exciting thing to watch in terms of postseason hockey, but for development and just the trajectory for this team, I think that you should be excited as a Flyers fan, because there's a lot to be happy with here. I have the Flyers finishing at 7. I could see them bumping up maybe a spot or two depending on how many games they win above their projection, but I think this is a pretty good spot for them to land in this division. Coming in at number 6, I have the Washington Capitals, a team that just barely made the playoffs last year with one of the worst goal differentials we've ever seen. I guess with this Capitals team, you could look at it in two ways. One, I like the aggressive approach that they made this offseason, trying to finish out the Alex Ovechkin era of this organization by surrounding him with some better pieces. But two, it's basically saying, well, when are you going to enter a rebuild, because this team isn't going to win a Stanley Cup as is. Like I said, they had an aggressive offseason, acquiring players like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Andrew Mangiapane, Logan Thompson, Jacob Chychrun, all solid role players who should be able to boost the potential of this team. But with other teams in their division getting better, I just see them falling off and having a bit of a regression. If Alex Ovechkin can return to form, and maybe if last season was just an injury that he was dealing with, maybe that will bring up a little bit more confidence for this team, in my opinion. But outside of that, I just see them kind of finishing around the same mark, maybe even a little bit less. I have them missing the playoffs this year like I did last year. I think other teams in their division are better, and I think the Capitals are going to finish at number 6. Hopefully we can see Alex Ovechkin looking a little bit more like himself this season though, because I am interested in seeing him get that goals record with this organization. I have them finishing at number 6. Slight regression for the Caps, but I do appreciate them putting some effort in to try to put out a manageable roster for this upcoming year. You know how I just talked about the Washington Capitals building a competent roster around their longtime superstar? Well, this next team, they're not doing that at all. Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins are coming in at number 5. It's so sad to not be able to watch Crosby in the playoffs anymore. He's one of the greatest players to ever touch a sheet, and at this point, it's just really sad to see the Penguins in this state. They have no cap space, they have no assets to make a big-time trade, and all of their guys are just getting older. Malkin, Crosby, Letang, Carlson, that's the core players of this roster, and they're all just going to be regressing as the years continue to go on. The Penguins are in a tough spot, but I still have them finishing at number 5 because I feel like the floor with Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Carlson is going to be higher than some of the other teams like Philly and Washington. But just looking at the lineup, there's only one word that comes to mind for me, and that's mid. I expect them to finish around the exact same spot as last year, maybe even slightly worse, maybe 83 to 85 points. The ceiling for this team is very, very low. And outside of Crosby, there's just not a lot of promise. The one thing I wanted to talk about was their defense. I think they have a lot of great offensive defensemen like we've been talking about with Carlson and Letang, and I think they needed to add a more defensive-minded guy, and the only player they added was Matt Grzelcyk, who is very similar to Carlson and Letang, and I just think that this defense needs a lot of work if they want to be taken seriously, as well as their goaltending. They're hanging on to Jari and Nedeljkovic, and the two of them are just as average comes. I think that they're fine goalies, but without a solid blue line in front of them and without the Penguins having an offense that can put up more than 3 goals a night, I just don't see this team going very far. Maybe they'll make the wild card spot at best, but outside of that, this team could potentially miss the playoffs again, and we could be missing out on the final years of Sidney Crosby as he continues to miss the playoffs. I have the Penguins at number 5. Not a lot of changes to this roster. I expect them to be around the same spot this upcoming season. Coming in at number 4, this is where I have the New York Islanders. Slightly below what they had last year, finishing 3rd in the division, but I still think that this is a great spot for this team. They had a pretty solid offseason, I would say, acquiring Anthony Duclair on a pretty bargain deal, as well as getting one of the biggest steals of the draft in Cole Yzerman. I love where this team is heading offensively. They've always been more defensive minded, but since Patrick Waugh took over, I just think that they're a lot quicker and more exciting to watch. Had a couple bounces gone differently in that Carolina series, I very well could have seen the Islanders take them to 7 or potentially even move on to the second round. When it comes to their defense, like I said, it's consistent. It's always going to be great. I also think that their goaltending is going to be much better next season. Ilya Sorokin is going to become that top-notch goalie that he's been throughout his entire career. This one season was the anomaly. I fully expect a bounce back one from him, as well as Varlamov still being one of the best backups in the NHL, providing that consistency throughout the regular season to get this team into the playoffs. I really like this roster. I think they're going to be great next season. I do think they need a little bit more help in the depth department, but their top 6 is looking a lot better. If they can continue developing Yzerman, put him in this lineup, I think this team is going to be set for the next couple of years. I don't have them being a serious cup contender, but as currently constructed, I like the Islanders, so I'm going to have them finishing in the number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. I actually really didn't like their offseason at all. I'm going to quickly go through all of this for you because I feel like they're the team that really had the most action throughout the offseason. Beginning with their acquisitions, they got Gostisbehere, Walker, Roslovic, Carrier, Robinson, Jost, and Stillman, while losing Jake Gensel, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Teuvo Teravainen, Stefan Noesen, Evgeny Kuznetsov, Antti Ranta, and Tony DeAngelo. Now, just comparing their additions with their subtractions, you can clearly see that this is going to be a new look Carolina Hurricanes. I think that their offense got worse. I think their defense got worse, and the Canes window really was over the past couple of seasons. A few of their guys are getting older, like Brett Burns, who is one of the bigger pieces to their defense, and now you're going to have to pay other players like Seth Jarvis, who are coming up for their RFA deals. I just think for this team, they're kind of trending in the wrong direction. I still think that they're talented enough to be considered a contender, and that's why I still have them as a top 3 team in the Metro. But when it comes to them in the postseason, I just never feel scared to play them. Their goaltending, it's very inconsistent, and Freddie Anderson is constantly injured. Who knows how Kochetkov is going to develop over the next couple of seasons. He had a great first year, but outside of that, who knows what's going to happen with him. I just don't know what this team is going to be next season. I really hope that they can still project to be that top-notch Carolina team that we've been seeing over the past 5 years. But when it comes to the playoffs, I'm just not convinced with them. I love some of their top guys. I'm kind of excited to see how they look next season, but very unimpressed with their offseason. And I think that's going to bump them down a peg when it comes to finishing in the Metro Division. So that's why I have them finishing at number 3. Coming in at number 2, I have the New Jersey Devils. Maybe a bit too high on this list, but I actually have a lot of expectations for this team, barring any injuries, of course, because that was the thing that really held back the Devils last season. They got a new head coach in Sheldon Keefe who really knows how to develop young players. He did a fantastic job in Toronto getting Marner, Matthews, and all of those guys to become the players that they are today. I also think they addressed their biggest Achilles heel in their goaltending by getting Jacob Markstrom via trade, and now boosting up their defense as well, acquiring Pesce and Dillon, and hopefully getting Dougie Hamilton back from injury to round out this roster and allow them to be the potential Stanley Cup champion team that they could be. I really like this young Devils team. I think the sky's the limit. I expect Jack Hughes to take another step. Nico Hischier is one of the better two-way centers in the NHL. And again, if all of these players are on the ice consistently, I think that they could be a top 3 team in the Metro Division. I have them finishing at number 2, just slightly above the Carolina Hurricanes. I love the Devils, and I really hope that this team can stay out of the injury zone and get themselves back into contention. Coming in at number 1, I have the President Trophy winning New York Rangers. This is the problem with the Rangers. I still think they're a top team in the NHL, but I do think their window is closing a bit. Some of their guys like Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, they're getting up there in age. Regardless, having great seasons last year, they're only going to have a limited amount of time that they're at this level for the Rangers to compete for a Stanley Cup. I do think it's really promising to see players like Matt Rempe coming onto the team, Alexis Lafreniere taking that next step, and then bringing in some other talent like Riley Smith to really round out your forward group. Their defense to me is still a little bit problematic. That Jacob Trouba contract, they tried to move off from it, but it's starting to seem like a problem for the team. And of course, Igor Shesterkin, he's going to need a payday soon, which means you're going to have to let go of some of the other players that you've had in your forward group for a while. A lot to talk about with this team, but for the next season, I'm very confident in them. I think that they should be the favorites to win the cup next year. They have the most balanced roster, and if they can just add maybe one more top 6 forward, or just add at least another guy to replace Jacob Trouba if they can move off of that contract, I think that they're going to be a very successful hockey team next season, and I could actually see them winning the President's Trophy again if they reach their full potential. I have the Rangers coming in at number 1 in the Metro. I think they should be the favorite, and for me, that's where I have them landing. But this is my NHL Metropolitan Division prediction for the upcoming hockey season. Let me know what you guys think about my list. Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Or do you just agree with my list entirely? Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.